Caleb Morgan stood outside the glass doors of Ardent Nexus headquarters, his reflection staring back at him in the pale morning light of a Chicago winter. Snow dusted the shoulders of his charcoal overcoat, and his breath formed small clouds that dissipated into the frozen air. He adjusted his tie one final time, then pulled out his phone. A voicemail notification blinked on the screen. He pressed play, and his daughter's voice filled his ear, small and bright. "Daddy, just do your best. I love you to the moon." He closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words settle into his chest like a shield against whatever waited inside. Then he silenced the phone, slipped it into his pocket, and walked through the doors toward the final interview that would determine everything. The conference room on the 42nd floor felt like a chamber designed for judgment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of downtown Chicago, the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan glittering in the distance. But Caleb barely registered the scenery. His attention was fixed on the woman seated at the head of the polished mahogany table. Evelyn Cross was younger than he had expected, perhaps 33 or 34, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized the angular precision of her cheekbones. She wore a charcoal blazer over a cream silk blouse, and her posture radiated absolute control, the kind that came not from arrogance, but from years of proving herself in rooms full of men who expected her to fail. Two other executives flanked her on either side. The silver-haired man to her left, Caleb recognized from his research as Thomas Vane, the chief operating officer, a veteran of 3 decades in infrastructure management, whose reputation for rigid adherence to protocol was legendary in the industry. The younger man to her right wore wire-rimmed glasses and a slightly rumpled Oxford shirt, and must have been Julian Hart, the head of technical operations, a brilliant systems architect who had designed much of Ardent Nexus's core infrastructure. Neither of them smiled when Caleb entered the room. Evelyn gestured to the leather chair across from her with a motion that was more command than invitation. "Mr. Morgan, please, sit." Caleb lowered himself into the seat, keeping his spine straight, his hands resting calmly on the armrests. He had prepared for this moment for weeks, studying the company's public filings, memorizing the names and backgrounds of key executives, rehearsing answers to every conceivable question. He knew his qualifications were exceptional by any objective measure. 15 years of experience in infrastructure systems engineering, including 7 years as a senior architect at Northern Grid, one of the largest utility companies in the Midwest. He had designed fail-safe protocols that were still considered industry standards. He had led teams through crisis after crisis without ever losing a single critical system. On paper, he was more than qualified for the senior infrastructure director position, but Caleb also knew that interviews were rarely about paper. "I've reviewed your file extensively," Evelyn said, flipping open a tablet in front of her with manicured fingers. Her voice was cool and precise, each word measured for maximum efficiency. "Impressive credentials. Your work at Northern Grid was particularly noteworthy. The cascade prevention system you implemented in 2019 saved the company an estimated $400 million in potential damages." "Thank you," Caleb said, keeping his voice neutral. "I'm proud of that work. It was a team effort, but I was fortunate to lead the design process." And yet, Evelyn's eyes lifted from the screen to meet his, and Caleb felt the full weight of her assessment. Her gaze was sharp, analytical, the kind that could dissect a person's weaknesses in seconds. "Since then, you've been working as an independent consultant. Sporadic contracts. No long-term commitments. No leadership positions." She paused, letting the silence stretch like a wire pulled taut. "Can you explain that gap in your career trajectory?" Caleb had known this question was coming. He had rehearsed his answer a dozen times in front of the bathroom mirror, practicing the careful balance of honesty and professionalism. But now, facing Evelyn's unblinking gaze, the rehearsed words felt hollow. He decided to tell the truth instead. "My wife passed away 4 years ago," he said quietly. "Cancer. It was aggressive and sudden. We thought she had more time. The doctors had given us 18 months, and then she was gone in 6 weeks. He paused, steadying his voice against the familiar tide of grief that still rose whenever he spoke of Sarah. I have a daughter, Iris. After Sarah passed, I realized I couldn't keep working 70-hour weeks. I couldn't miss another school play, or another bedtime story, or another nightmare that needed a father's comfort. So I stepped back from full-time work. I took consulting contracts that let me be home when Iris needed me, even if it meant sacrificing career advancement. Thomas Vane shifted uncomfortably in his chair, exchanging a meaningful glance with Julian Hart. Something flickered behind Evelyn's eyes, a brief shadow that might have been empathy or calculation, but it vanished before Caleb could identify it. I appreciate your honesty, Evelyn said after a moment, but I have to be direct with you, Mr. Morgan. The position we're filling requires total commitment, someone who can be on call at any hour of the day or night, someone who can travel on short notice to client sites across the country, someone who can prioritize the needs of this company above everything else in their life. She closed the tablet with a soft click that echoed in the silent room. Based on what you've just told me about your circumstances and priorities, I don't believe you're the right fit for this role. I'm sorry. Caleb felt the words land like a physical blow to his chest, but he kept his face carefully neutral. The rejection stung more than he had expected, not because he had been certain of getting the job, but because he had allowed himself to hope. He had imagined telling Iris about the new position, about the stability it would bring. Now that hope evaporated like morning frost, but instead of arguing or pleading, Caleb simply nodded with what dignity he could muster. I understand, he said, his voice steady. I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me and for being direct about your concerns. Evelyn seemed almost surprised by his composure. She had conducted hundreds of interviews and had seen every possible reaction to rejection, but she had rarely seen someone accept a negative verdict with such quiet grace. Caleb rose from his chair with measured calm, buttoned his suit jacket, and extended his hand across the table. Evelyn shook it firmly. Best of luck with your search, Caleb said. Then he turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing against the marble floor. He made it to the elevator bank before the full weight of the rejection settled onto his shoulders. The polished chrome doors slid open, and he stepped inside, pressing the button for the lobby. As the elevator began its descent, he pulled out his phone and dialed the familiar number. Maria, the elderly widow who watched Iris after school, answered on the second ring. Hey, Mr. Morgan. How did it go? Everything's fine, Maria. The interview just finished. Can I talk to Iris for a minute? There was shuffling, then Iris's voice came through, bright and curious and completely innocent of the disappointment her father was carrying. Daddy, are you done with your meeting already? I'm done, sweetheart. Just heading home now. Did you do your best, like we talked about? Caleb closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the elevator wall. I did my best, baby. I promise. Then that's all that matters, Iris said with simple, unwavering certainty. That's what Mommy always said, right? Do your best and let God handle the rest. The echo of Sarah's words in their daughter's voice hit Caleb like a wave. He swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. That's exactly what Mommy said. You have such a good memory. Can we have pizza for dinner tonight? Despite everything, Caleb found himself smiling. Yeah, baby. Love you, Daddy. To the moon and back. He ended the call just as the elevator reached the 20th floor. The doors opened, and a cluster of people rushed in, their faces tight with anxiety, their voices overlapping in urgent tones. Julian says the cascade is accelerating faster than the models predicted, a young woman said. The containment protocols aren't holding. How much time do we have before critical failure? Maybe an hour, maybe less. The engineering team is running out of options. The elevator stopped again on the 15th floor. More people crowded in, clutching smartphones with scrolling data. Core system integrity is degrading exponentially. Redundancy protocols are failing across multiple sectors. Estimated economic damage, if we can't contain this, is in the billions. By the time Caleb reached the lobby, his pulse had quickened with professional instinct. He stepped out into the cavernous atrium, but instead of heading for the exit, he paused near a cluster of security guards, speaking urgently into radios. All non-essential personnel need to evacuate the building immediately. This is not a drill. The crisis response team is assembling on 42. Executive authorization required for all access. Caleb stood frozen, his mind racing. He knew that tone. He had heard it before in control rooms during cascading blackouts. Whatever was happening upstairs was serious. And it sounded like exactly the kind of problem he had spent his entire career learning to solve. He should leave. He had been rejected. He thought of Iris waiting at home, of the pizza dinner he had promised, of the bedtime story they would share. He had built his entire life around being present for her, but another part of him refused to stay silent. He thought of the cascade failure spreading through Ardent Nexus's systems. He thought of families losing power, hospitals going dark, heating systems failing in the middle of a Chicago winter. And he thought of what Sarah would have said. "You have a gift, Caleb. A gift for seeing patterns that other people miss. It would be wrong to waste that gift when people need you." He turned and walked back toward the elevators. The security guard held up a hand as Caleb approached. "Sir, the building is being evacuated. All visitors need to exit immediately." "I understand," Caleb said, keeping his voice calm. "But I think I can help with whatever is happening upstairs. I'm an infrastructure systems engineer with 15 years of experience. I was just here for an interview on the 42nd floor." The guard hesitated, then spoke into his radio. "This is Lopez at the main elevator bank. The job candidate who was just interviewing with Miss Cross is requesting access. Says he's an infrastructure specialist." A harried voice responded. "Send him up immediately. We need everyone we can get." The elevator ride back to the 42nd floor felt longer than before. Caleb stood alone in the ascending car, preparing himself for whatever chaos awaited. When the doors opened, chaos greeted him like a physical force. The sleek conference room had been transformed into a war room. Engineers hunched over laptops, faces pale and illuminated by scrolling error messages. Thomas Vane barked orders into his phone. Julian Hart paced before a massive wall display showing a network diagram, vast sections pulsing red with alarming frequency. At the center stood Evelyn Cross. Her composure cracked for the first time. She was struggling to hold together a situation spiraling beyond her control. Her head snapped toward him. "What are you doing here? I heard about the crisis. I came back because I believe I can help." Thomas looked incredulous. "You were just rejected, and now you want to insert yourself into a company emergency? With respect, Mr. Vane, your containment protocols are failing. Every minute you debate is a minute closer to catastrophe. I have 15 years of experience with exactly this kind of problem. You can use that experience or watch me walk out." The room fell silent. Before Thomas could respond, Evelyn held up a hand. "Let him speak." "You have 60 seconds, Mr. Morgan." Caleb stepped closer to the wall display. "Your team is treating this as a software failure. They're trying to patch code, contain the spread, restore from backups. Standard playbook. But it's not working because this isn't primarily a software problem. It's data integrity." He pointed to nodes near the center of the diagram. "Your legacy integration points from when you acquired Midwest Power. They're feeding corrupted historical data into your prediction algorithms. Your safety protocols trust that data implicitly. Every time you try containment, the algorithms read corrupted data, calculate that containment will cause harm, and override your protocols. You're fighting your own system." Julian went pale. "Those integration points have been stable for years. Stable doesn't mean correct." "Something changed recently. The corruption is subtle enough to pass validation but compounds over time. Your system has been building on flawed foundations for weeks. Today it reached critical mass. Evelyn turned to Julian. Is this possible? Maybe. We'd have to dig through months of logs, then start digging. She turned to Caleb. You can stay, as advisor only. If your theory is wrong, you leave immediately. The next 45 minutes were a blur. Julian's team dug through logs while the cascade continued spreading. Thomas maintained phone calls with board members. Evelyn moved between stations, holding morale together through sheer will. Caleb's phone buzzed. Maria, Iris keeps asking when you're coming home. He checked his watch. Past 6. Tell her I'll be home soon. Tell her I love her. He returned to the display. Julian looked up, face ashen. He's right. Historical data corrupted for at least 6 weeks. Feeding garbage into prediction models. How did we miss this? Evelyn demanded. The corruption mimics normal data, Caleb said. Your algorithms are adaptive. They adjusted to accommodate bad information. Feedback loop of compounding errors. Thomas slammed his phone down. The board wants a plan in 30 minutes, or they authorize controlled shutdown. That would take weeks to recover from, Julian said. We'd lose everything. Evelyn turned to Caleb. You identified the problem. Do you have a solution? He hesitated. One possibility. Desperate. Not safe. Tell me. Caleb pointed to a subsystem at the network's edge. Your power distribution module handles coordination for 300,000 customers. It's also the primary source of corrupted data. He paused. If you temporarily disconnect it, you remove the source of bad data. Your algorithms lose their baseline but stop receiving corruption. That gives your team a window to purge the bad data and rebuild clean. Julian's eyes widened. If we disconnect, those customers lose smart grid features. Load balancing, outage prevention. For how long? Evelyn asked. If everything goes well, 2 to 3 hours. And if things don't go according to plan, 6 to 12 hours. Maybe more. He met her eyes. It's trading certain catastrophe for probable inconvenience, with a small chance of different catastrophe. But it's the best option. Thomas's face purpled. Absolutely not. 300,000 customers in winter. The liability would be astronomical. Your legal team can worry later, Evelyn said quietly. Right now, I need to keep this company alive. She stood motionless, staring at the spreading red zones. The weight of leadership distilled to its purest form. One person, one choice, hundreds of thousands of lives. If we do nothing, she asked, within 2 hours, your entire network goes down. Not 300,000 customers. 3 million. Weeks to repair. And if we do what you're suggesting? Worst realistic outcome, 12 to 18 hours of degraded service for 300,000 customers. Serious reputation damage. Survivable. Evelyn picked up the phone. This is Evelyn Cross. Emergency conference call with the full board. Yes, I know what time it is. We have less than 2 hours before this becomes uncontainable. 15 minutes of controlled tension followed. Evelyn explained the situation with ruthless clarity. Thomas interjected objections she acknowledged but didn't allow to derail her. Finally, she hung up. The board has been informed. The decision is mine. She turned to Julian. Execute the disconnection. Julian's fingers moved across his keyboard. The power module flickered from green to amber to deep gray. Then, slowly, the spread began to slow. It's working, Julian breathed. The cascade is stabilizing, but they weren't safe yet. Alerts flashed as load balancers struggled to compensate. Increase auxiliary capacity to northern sector, Caleb said. Secondary cascade forming. Julian relayed the command. Crisis averted. But another problem emerged. Flush the buffer. Restart validation sequence. You'll lose 10 minutes of data, but the alternative is recontamination. Again, Julian followed. Again, disaster was avoided. For 90 minutes, Caleb stood at the center of crisis response, calling out problems before they became catastrophes, suggesting solutions that Julian's team implemented with increasing confidence. Like a conductor leading an orchestra through impossible complexity, Evelyn remained at his side throughout, watching him work, asking occasional questions. At 9:47, Julian announced core systems clean, corrupted data purged, algorithms reset, network ready for reconnection, all sectors nominal. Integration proceeding within expected parameters. The gray cluster flickered back to green. Across the city, 300,000 customers regained smart grid protection without ever knowing they had lost it. The room erupted in exhausted celebration. Engineers slumped in chairs. Someone produced champagne. Julian approached Caleb with hand extended. "I've built these systems for 5 years. You saw in 20 minutes what I missed for months. You saved this company. I was in the right place at the right time. You did the actual work. No. The willingness to come back after rejection, that's something else entirely. Thank you." After Julian moved away, Caleb found himself alone by the windows. The city sprawled below, millions of lights, each representing a life continuing uninterrupted because of what had happened in this room. His phone buzzed. Text from Maria. Iris fell asleep waiting. "Pizza in fridge. She said to tell you she's proud of you, Mr. Morgan." He turned. Evelyn stood behind him with 2 champagne glasses. She offered one, and he accepted. "I owe you an apology," she said, moving to stand beside him. "Not for the decision I made this morning, for the assumptions that led to it." "What assumptions?" "I looked at your circumstances and saw limitations. Single father, young daughter, consulting work, career going sideways. I judged your capacity for commitment based on circumstances instead of character. And now I understand I was measuring the wrong things." Evelyn turned to face him. "I'm 33 years old. CEO for 2 years. Every day feels like a test I might fail. Everyone's watching, waiting for the young woman who rose too fast to crash. That sounds exhausting." "It is. And because of that, I've learned to eliminate uncertainty, to choose safe options. This morning, you were uncertainty. So, I eliminated you. And then I came back, not for revenge, not to prove me wrong. You came back because you saw a problem you knew how to solve, and walking away would have violated something fundamental in who you are." Caleb was silent for a moment. "I have a daughter, 7 years old. Every day I try to teach her that character matters. That integrity isn't about winning, it's about being the same person whether anyone is watching or not. And today, I couldn't teach her those things if I didn't believe them myself. So when I heard about the crisis, I had a choice. Go home to pizza and bedtime stories and tell myself it wasn't my responsibility, or turn back and try to help, even knowing I might not be wanted." Evelyn nodded. "That's exactly what I saw in you today. Not just technical skill, someone who holds himself to standards that don't depend on external validation." She set down her champagne glass. "I'd like to offer you a position at Ardent Nexus. Not what you interviewed for this morning. Something different. Chief Systems Resilience Officer. Report directly to me. Identify vulnerabilities before they become crises. Challenge assumptions everyone takes for granted. Be the person who sees what others miss." The offer was everything he had hoped for, but he thought of Iris, of pizza dinners and bedtime stories, of school plays and soccer games. "I have conditions." "Name them." "I need to be home for dinner most nights. Not every night, but most. I need to be at school plays and parent-teacher conferences. I need to be the father my daughter deserves, not just the father my career allows." He met her eyes. "If that's incompatible with what you're offering, I need to know now." Evelyn smiled for the first time since he had met her, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Mr. Morgan, if you had demanded a corner office and a stock package, I would have said yes without hesitation, but you asked for dinner with your daughter." She extended her hand. "Those conditions are not just acceptable. They're exactly what I would expect from someone whose integrity I've just witnessed." Welcome to Ardent Nexus. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Caleb brought Iris to the Ardent Nexus building. The lobby was nearly empty, weekend stillness replacing weekday bustle. Iris's small hand wrapped around his fingers. "This is where you're going to work, Daddy." "This is where I'm going to work, sweetheart. It's really big, like a castle made of windows." They rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. Evelyn was waiting when the doors opened, wearing jeans and a cream sweater instead of her usual business attire, her hair loose around her shoulders. "You must be Iris," Evelyn said, crouching to bring herself to the girl's level. Iris studied her gravely. "You're the lady who's going to be my daddy's boss?" "I am. My name is Evelyn. Daddy says you're really smart. He says you make hard decisions and you're not afraid to be wrong." Iris paused. "Thank you for giving him a second chance. My daddy works really hard." Evelyn blinked rapidly. "Your daddy earned that second chance all by himself. I just had the good sense to recognize what was in front of me." They spent the next hour exploring the empty offices, Iris spinning in every executive chair she could find, asking endless questions. At one point, standing by the windows, Iris tugged on Evelyn's sleeve. "Miss Evelyn? Daddy missed pizza night because he was helping you. That was okay because helping is important. But can you try not to make him miss too many? Pizza night is when we talk about our weeks and remember Mommy." Evelyn glanced at Caleb, who shrugged. "I promise," Evelyn said solemnly, "to do everything I can to make sure your daddy is home for pizza night. And if I ever need him to miss one, it'll be for a really important reason." Iris nodded with satisfaction. "That seems fair." Later, walking to the car in the cold afternoon, Iris asked, "Daddy, what does worth mean?" Caleb knelt to her level. "Worth is the value of something, how important it is. Like money? Sometimes. But the most important kinds of worth have nothing to do with money." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, so much like Sarah's that it made his heart ache. "Like you, sweetheart. You're worth more to me than all the money in the world." Iris thought about this. "Is that why you came back to help the computer people even though they told you to go away? Because helping was worth doing even if nobody was going to pay you?" "Yeah, baby. That's exactly why. Mommy would be proud of you." The words hit him unexpectedly. He pulled Iris into a tight hug while the winter wind swirled around them. That evening, they finally had their pizza. Iris carefully separated the pepperoni from her slice, a ritual she had inherited from Sarah, one of 1,000 small gestures that kept her mother alive in their daily routines. "Daddy, are you happy about your new job?" "I am. It's going to be hard work, and sometimes I might have to stay late, but it's work that matters. Work that helps people. That's what Mommy used to say about being a nurse, that the tired was worth it because the helping was worth it. Your Mommy was a very wise woman." "I know." Iris took another bite. "I'm glad you did your best." Caleb squeezed her hand. "Me too, baby. Me too." Outside, the city hummed with its endless rhythms. Somewhere in the tower of Ardent Nexus, systems ran smoothly through the winter night, lights blinking in the darkness, and in a small apartment on the 15th floor, a father and daughter finished their pizza, washed the dishes together, and settled onto the couch for a bedtime story. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new moments of difficulty to overcome. But tonight, worth was measured in simpler things. In bedtime, stories and prayers, whispered in the darkness, in small hands, reaching for larger ones and finding them always there. Caleb carried Iris to bed after she fell asleep on the couch, tucking the blankets around her chin and brushing a kiss against her forehead. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. "Love you, Daddy," she murmured. "Love you too, sweetheart." To the moon and back. He stood at the window afterward. Somewhere out there, Evelyn Cross was probably still working. Somewhere, Julian Hart was reviewing logs. Somewhere, Thomas Vane was drafting memos. And here, in this apartment, Caleb Morgan was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because he had proven his worth to a company, or a CEO, or a board of directors. Not because he had saved the day and earned recognition. Those things mattered, in their way, but they weren't what mattered most. What mattered most was sleeping in the next room. What mattered most was the promise he had made to Sarah in those final terrible days. To raise their daughter with love and integrity and the unshakable belief that character counted more than achievement. He had kept that promise today. He would keep it tomorrow and the day after and all the days that followed. That was worth. The only kind that truly mattered. The only kind that would last. Watching. The investors are watching. The media is watching. Everyone is waiting for the moment when the young woman who rose too fast finally crashes back to earth. That sounds exhausting. It is. And because of that exhaustion, I've learned to make quick judgments, to eliminate uncertainty wherever I can, to choose the safe option, the predictable option, the option that won't embarrass me if it goes wrong. She exhaled slowly. This morning, you were an uncertainty, a risk I didn't want to take, so I eliminated you. And then I came back, and then you came back. Not for revenge, not to prove me wrong, not even for a second chance at the job. Evelyn shook her head slowly, something like wonder in her voice. You came back because you saw a problem you knew how to solve, and walking away from it would have violated something fundamental in who you are. Caleb was silent for a moment, considering her words carefully. I have a daughter, he said finally. Iris. She's 7 years old, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me. Every day, I try to teach her that character matters, that how you handle difficulty matters more than whether you experience difficulty. That integrity isn't about winning. It's about being the same person whether anyone is watching or not. And today I couldn't teach her those things if I didn't believe them myself. So, when I heard about the crisis, I had a choice. I could keep walking, go home to pizza and bedtime stories, and tell myself it wasn't my responsibility. Or I could turn around and try to help, even knowing I might fail, even knowing I might not be wanted. Evelyn nodded slowly. That's exactly what I saw in you today. Not just technical skill, though God knows you have plenty of that. I saw someone who holds himself to a standard that doesn't depend on external validation. Someone who does the right thing because it's the right thing, not because someone is keeping score. She set down her champagne glass and turned to face him fully. I'd like to offer you a position at Ardent Nexus, Mr. Morgan, not the position you interviewed for this morning. That job was for an infrastructure director, someone to maintain existing systems and implement incremental improvements. What I'm offering now is something different, something that recognizes what I actually witnessed today. What exactly are you offering? A newly created role, Chief Systems Resilience Officer. You would report directly to me, with authority across all technical divisions. Your mandate would be to identify vulnerabilities before they become crises, to challenge assumptions that everyone else takes for granted, to be the person in the room who sees what others miss. She paused. It would be demanding work, but it would also be work that matters. Work that saves companies and protects communities and makes a genuine difference in the world. Caleb felt the weight of the offer settle onto his shoulders. It was everything he had hoped for when he walked into this building that morning. And more. Recognition. Responsibility. The chance to do meaningful work at the highest level. But he also thought of Iris, of pizza dinners and bedtime stories, of school plays and soccer games and the 1,000 small moments that made up a childhood. I have conditions, he said. Name them. I need to be home for dinner most nights. Not every night, but most. I need to be at school plays and parent-teacher conferences and doctor's appointments. I need to be the father my daughter deserves, not just the father my career allows. He met her eyes steadily. If that's incompatible with what you're offering, I need to know now. Evelyn smiled for the first time since he had met her, a genuine expression that transformed her sharp features into something warmer and more human. Mr. Morgan, if you had demanded a corner office and a stock package, I would have said yes without hesitation, but you asked for dinner with your daughter. She extended her hand. Those conditions are not just acceptable. They're exactly what I would expect from someone whose integrity I've just spent the evening witnessing. Welcome to Ardent Nexus. 2 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday afternoon when the winter sun cast long shadows across the snow-covered city, Caleb brought Iris to the Ardent Nexus building. The lobby was nearly empty, the usual weekday bustle replaced by weekend stillness. Their footsteps echoed against the marble floor as they walked toward the elevator bank, Iris's small hand wrapped tightly around her father's fingers. "This is where you're going to work, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes wide as she took in the soaring atrium with its glass ceiling and abstract sculptures. "This is where I'm going to work, sweetheart. It's really big, like a castle made of windows." Caleb smiled at the description. "I guess it kind of is." They rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, Iris pressing her nose against the glass walls to watch the city shrink below them. The conference room where Caleb had been interviewed, rejected, and ultimately vindicated was visible through the glass doors. But today it was empty and peaceful, sunlight streaming through the windows to pool on the polished table. Evelyn was waiting for them when the elevator doors opened. She had traded her usual business attire for dark jeans and a cream-colored cashmere sweater, and her hair fell loose around her shoulders instead of being pulled back in its characteristic severe bun. She looked younger like this, more relaxed, more human. "You must be Iris," Evelyn said, crouching down to bring herself to the little girl's eye level. "Your father has told me so much about you." Iris studied her with the grave intensity that only children could muster, her head tilted slightly to one side. "You're the lady who's going to be my daddy's boss?" "I am. My name is Evelyn. Daddy says you're really smart. He says you make hard decisions and you're not afraid to be wrong." Evelyn's eyebrows rose slightly, and she glanced up at Caleb with something like amusement. "Did he say that?" "He said you gave him a second chance, even though you didn't have to. He said that takes courage." Iris paused, considering her next words carefully. "Thank you for that. My daddy works really hard, and he's really good at fixing things. I'm glad you noticed." For a moment, Evelyn seemed genuinely moved. She blinked rapidly, then smiled at Iris with an expression that held no trace of the sharp, controlled CEO Caleb had first encountered. "Your daddy earned that second chance all by himself," Evelyn said. "I just had the good sense to recognize what was in front of me." They spent the next hour exploring the empty offices, Iris spinning in every executive chair she could find, asking endless questions about what each piece of equipment did and why grown-ups needed so many computers. Evelyn answered each question with patience and genuine interest, her earlier formality melting away in the face of a 7-year-old's relentless curiosity. At one point, standing by the windows that overlooked the city, Iris tugged on Evelyn's sleeve. "Miss Evelyn?" "Yes, Iris?" "My daddy missed pizza night because he was helping you. That was okay because helping people is important. But can you try not to make him miss too many pizza nights? Pizza night is when we talk about our weeks and tell jokes and remember my mommy." Evelyn glanced at Caleb, who shrugged slightly, as if to say she speaks her mind. "I promise," Evelyn said solemnly, "to do everything I can to make sure your daddy is home for pizza night. And if I ever need him to miss one, I'll make sure it's for a really, really important reason." Iris considered this for a moment, then nodded with satisfaction. "Okay, that seems fair." Later, after Evelyn had walked them back to the lobby and said her goodbyes, Caleb and Iris stepped out into the cold winter afternoon. The sun was beginning to set, painting the snow-covered streets in shades of gold and pink. Iris slipped her mittened hand into her father's as they walked toward the parking garage. "Daddy?" "Yeah." "Sweetheart, I like Miss Evelyn. She's nice when you get past the serious part. Caleb smiled. She is. She's had to be serious for a long time because of her job, but I think she's learning that you can be serious and still be kind. Like you? I try to be like that, yeah. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their breath forming small clouds in the frozen air. When they reached the car, Iris paused before climbing in. Daddy, what does worth mean? Caleb knelt down to bring himself to her eye level, just as Evelyn had done earlier. Worth is the value of something, how important it is. Like how much it costs? Sometimes. But the most important kinds of worth don't have anything to do with money. He reached out and tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, so much like Sarah's hair that it made his heart ache. Like you, sweetheart. You're worth more to me than all the money in the world, and that's not something anyone can buy or sell. Iris thought about this for a long moment. Is that why you came back to help the computer people even though they told you to go away? Because helping was worth doing even if nobody was going to pay you? Caleb felt his throat tighten with emotion. Yeah, baby. That's exactly why. Mommy would be proud of you. The words hit him like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. He pulled Iris into a tight hug, holding her against him while the winter wind swirled around them. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. That evening, they finally had their pizza, sitting together at the small kitchen table in their apartment while the city lights twinkled outside the window. Iris carefully separated the pepperoni from her slice, arranging them in a neat pile on her plate before eating the cheese underneath. It was a ritual she had inherited from Sarah, one of 1,000 small gestures that kept her mother alive in their daily routines. Daddy? Iris asked between bites. Yeah? Are you happy about your new job? Caleb considered the question seriously, the way he always did when Iris asked him something important. I am. It's going to be hard work, and sometimes I might have to stay late or miss things. But it's also going to be work that matters. Work that helps people. That's what Mommy used to say about being a nurse, that the tired was worth it because the helping was worth it. Your Mommy was a very wise woman. I know. Iris took another bite of pizza, chewing thoughtfully. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart? I'm glad you did your best. Caleb reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Me too, baby. Me too. Outside, the city hummed with its endless rhythms, millions of lives intersecting and diverging, each one seeking its own definition of meaning and value. Somewhere in the gleaming tower of ardent nexus, systems ran smoothly through the winter night, lights blinking in the darkness, data flowing along paths that Caleb had helped to secure. And in a small apartment on the 15th floor of an ordinary building, a father and daughter finished their pizza, washed the dishes together side by side at the sink, and settled onto the couch for a bedtime story. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new crises to navigate, new moments of doubt and difficulty to overcome. The world would continue to be complicated and demanding, and sometimes unfair. But tonight, in this quiet space they had built together out of love and loss and determination, worth was measured in simpler things, in shared meals and familiar rituals, in bedtime stories read aloud and prayers whispered in the darkness, in small hands reaching for larger ones and finding them always there. Caleb carried Iris to her bed after she fell asleep on the couch, tucking the blankets around her chin and brushing a kiss against her forehead. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open for just a moment. Love you, Daddy, she murmured. Love you too, sweetheart. To the moon and back, she smiled, already drifting back into dreams, and Caleb stood watching her for a long moment before finally turning off the light and closing the door. He walked to the window and looked out at the city one last time. Somewhere out there, Evelyn Cross was probably still working, still carrying the weight of an entire company on her shoulders. Somewhere, Julian Hart was reviewing system logs, making sure the crisis was truly behind them. Somewhere, Thomas Vane was drafting memos about liability and protocol. And here, in this apartment, Caleb Morgan was exactly where he was supposed to be, not because he had proven his worth to a company or a CEO or a board of directors, not because he had saved the day and earned recognition and secured his financial future. But they weren't what mattered most. What mattered most was sleeping in the next room, dreaming whatever dreams 7-year-old girls dream. What mattered most was the promise he had made to Sarah in those final, terrible days, to raise their daughter with love and integrity and the unshakable belief that character counted more than achievement. He had kept that promise today. He would keep it tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days that followed. That was worth. The only kind that truly mattered. The only kind that would last.